The transport pod smelled like old metal and other people's nerves. Daniel Hart pressed his forehead against the small, round window and watched the floating city grow larger in the dark. Aurelis Cultural Academy looked like a silver flower bolted to the side of a giant orange storm. Lightning the size of countries flickered far below it. He thought about how his father had cried at the spaceport, then pretended he had not. He thought about how his own hands had not stopped shaking since. Around him sat creatures he had only ever seen on tutoring screens. A tall blue boy with feathered ears. A short stone-skinned girl who hummed to herself. 3 Velkari students in golden robes who took up an entire row and refused to lower their voices. One of them, broader than the others with a sharp ridge above his eyes, had been staring at Daniel for the whole ride. The boy's name, Daniel had overheard, was Tarn Kovesh. The pod docked with a soft hiss. A polite voice said in many languages that humans were the last to disembark. Daniel waited his turn and stepped out into a hall taller than any building back home. The ceiling glowed soft gold. Banners of 40 species hung from beams. The human banner was small and tucked near the back, almost an afterthought. A staff member checked his name and pointed him to a long corridor that led to the dorms. Daniel walked alone. Other students passed him in clusters. Some glanced at him and laughed under their breath. One Velkari girl made a face like she had smelled something bad. Daniel kept walking. His father had told him to keep his head up and his mouth shut for the first week. "Watch," his father had said. "Learn the room." His dorm was a small white box with 1 bed, 1 desk, and a window. He set down his bag, sat on the bed, and breathed out for the first time in hours. The next morning he found the dining hall. It was huge, with curved tables that floated slightly above the floor, and food stations grouped by species. He took a tray of something brown that looked safe and looked around for a place to sit. That was when he saw her. She sat alone at a table near the corner. A soft glow surrounded her body, lifting her gently above the seat. Her legs lay limp inside her long, pale robe. A delicate silver ring circled her wrist and gave off a quiet hum. Her skin was the color of light sand. Her hair was long and dark and tied back with a single thin cord. She was eating very slowly, using one hand to guide the spoon, the other resting in her lap like it did not work well. No one sat near her. There was empty space around her table like a circle had been drawn. Daniel watched a group of Velkari students walk past. Tarn Kovesh was with them. As they passed her table, one of them flicked a finger and knocked over her drink. The pale liquid spread across her tray. They laughed and walked on. The girl did not cry. She did not call anyone. She just reached for a napkin with her trembling hand and tried to soak up the spill. The napkin slipped from her fingers and fell to the floor. Daniel did not remember deciding. He just walked. He set his tray down across from her, knelt to pick up the napkin, and quietly helped her wipe the spill. He did not look at her face. He did not want her to feel watched. When the tray was clean, he sat down across from her and started eating his brown food. The hall got quieter. He felt eyes on his back. He kept eating. After a long moment, a soft voice said, "You did not have to do that." Daniel looked up. Her eyes were a strange shade of pale violet, soft and tired. He shrugged. "I know." She studied him with the careful look of someone who did not trust kind things. "What is your name?" "Daniel." "Lyra." She did not give a family name. He did not ask for one. They ate in shared quiet. She offered him a piece of bread from her tray that humans were allowed to eat. He thanked her and tried it. It tasted like warm honey. When the bell chimed for the next class, Lyra activated her ring and floated gently upward. Daniel noticed she struggled to balance with her tray. Without asking, he picked it up and carried it for her to the return slot. She watched him do it with an expression he could not read. "You are very quiet for a human," she said. "My father said to watch first," he said. A small smile touched her mouth. It looked like it had not been used in a while. "Your father sounds wise." "He is tired mostly." She laughed. It was a soft, surprised sound, as if she had not meant to. Then she nodded once, gave him a tiny wave with her trembling hand, and floated away toward her own corridor. Daniel stood there for a moment, holding his empty tray. Far above the campus, in a chamber lined with maps of 100 star systems, a tall woman in dark silver robes leaned forward in her seat. On the screen before her, the human boy was still standing in the dining hall, watching her daughter leave. The woman's name was Valora Soviel. Around her, cloaked figures waited for an order. She gave none. She only said very softly, "Let us see what he does tomorrow." The screen blinked off. The boy in the dining hall picked up his bag and went to class, knowing nothing. Rain that was not rain fell on the dome above the academy. It looked like rain, but the drops were small bursts of gas from the storm below, caught in the magnetic field and broken into shining beads. They slid across the glass in long silver lines. Lyra Soviel watched them from her seat in the library and tried not to look at the door every 2 minutes. She was waiting for him. She had not asked him to come. She had only mentioned, in passing, that she went to the upper library between classes. That had been 3 days ago. Yet every day at the same time, the door slid open, and the quiet human boy walked in with his bag slung over one shoulder and a book in his hand. He never sat too close. He never asked too much. He just took a chair nearby and read. Today was the same. He came in, nodded at her once, and sat 2 seats away. "You are late," she said. He blinked. 2 minutes. That is late. A small smile tugged at his mouth. He did not reply. He just opened his book. Over the past week, a routine had formed between them. Daniel met her outside her morning class because the corridor was always crowded, and her ring took longer to recalibrate when too many bodies pressed close. He carried her bag whenever the hallways turned narrow. He learned to recognize the soft warning chime of her wrist device, which meant she needed to sit. He brought her water without being asked. He never once said the word help. Lyra had started to laugh again. Small laughs, then real ones. One afternoon she had tried to teach him the 7 hand signs of her people's first greeting, and his thick human fingers had bent the wrong way every time. She had laughed until her ring chimed. He had tried to teach her how to whistle in return. Her mouth was not shaped for it. She had blown air for an entire afternoon and produced only one tiny squeak, which made her laugh so hard she had to lie down. But the kindness had a shadow. Tarn Kovesh had noticed. The idea of a human, the lowest species on the campus list, sitting beside a strange, crippled girl from a species no one had ever heard of, seemed to insult him personally. He began to act on it. On the 4th day, Daniel had been tripped in the corridor. He had fallen hard on his shoulder and dropped Lyra's bag. He had stood up, picked up the bag, dusted it off, and kept walking as if nothing had happened. On the 6th day, Tarn's friends had whispered loud enough for everyone to hear that humans were scavenger species, that they attached themselves to the weak because they could not survive among equals. Daniel had heard. He had said nothing. On the 7th day, while Lyra had been resting on a bench, one of Tarn's friends had walked past and flicked the switch on the back of her wrist ring. The ring had powered down. Lyra had dropped from her floating posture and crashed forward onto her knees. The pain in her useless legs had been sharp and dull at once, a deep ache that her nerves did not understand. Daniel had been there in less than a second. He had reset the ring with the small recovery code she had once shown him in passing. He had lifted her gently back into the air. He had not chased the boy who did it. "Why did you not hit him?" Lyra had asked her later, in the quiet of the gardens. Daniel had thought for a long moment. "My father told me anger is easy. Anyone can swing a fist. Standing in front of someone is harder. It is harder to laugh at, too." Lyra had been quiet for the rest of the evening. Now, in the library, she watched him read. His hair fell into his eyes. A small bruise sat on his jaw from yesterday, when Tarn had bumped into him in the cafeteria and made it look like an accident. She wanted to ask about it. She did not. Instead, she said, "Tomorrow is the festival." He looked up. "I know. I am performing. I know. You will come." He smiled a little. "I know." She rolled her eyes. "You are not a useful conversation partner." "I am useful," he said. "Just quiet." She laughed, and the sound echoed gently in the high stone ceiling. A few other students at distant tables turned to look, surprised. The strange girl with the broken legs was laughing. The human boy was making her laugh. It looked somehow like a small miracle. That night, in her dorm, Lyra sat at her desk and opened the small, private channel to her mother. The blue light of the screen lit her face. Her mother's image appeared, calm and beautiful as always, asking about her studies, her health, her food. Lyra answered every question carefully. She did not mention Daniel. Not once. She did not know how to say it. She did not want her mother to look up his file. She did not want a polite escort assigned to him. She did not want him moved into a finer dorm or given a title or sent gifts he would feel he could not refuse. She wanted, for once in her quiet life, one thing that was hers and not the Dominion's. When the call ended, she sat for a long time staring at the dark screen. In a chamber 1,000 light years away, the High Matriarch of the Soviel Dominion turned to her advisors. Did she mention the boy? "No, my lady." "Good. She is learning to keep secrets. That means she has something worth keeping." Valora smiled faintly. "Continue the watch, and prepare the festival security. Tomorrow may be interesting." The polishing cloth was older than Daniel. It had belonged to his grandfather and then his father, and now it sat in his hand inside a small white dorm room on a floating academy at the edge of neutral space. He rubbed the soft fabric against his only good shirt, working out a crease near the collar. The shirt was plain. The cloth was plain. The boy doing the polishing was plain. None of it matched the size of the night ahead. He looked at the clock. 40 minutes until the festival began. Lyra had told him she would walk to the hall on her own from her dorm because she needed the quiet time to focus before her performance. He had promised to meet her in the front row. He pulled on the shirt, tucked it in, and stepped out into the corridor. The campus was alive with color. Students in robes from every species walked toward the festival hall. Music drifted out of open doors. Daniel kept his head down and walked. He turned a corner near the east wing. The corridor here was empty. The lights had been dimmed for the festival. His footsteps echoed softly against the stone. Then he heard a thud and a soft cry. He stopped. The sound had come from the next hallway. He walked faster. When he turned the corner, his blood went cold. Lyra lay against the wall, her body twisted at the wrong angle, her legs limp beneath her like dropped ropes. Her wrist ring was dark. Tarn Kavesh stood over her with 2 friends behind him. One of the friends was laughing. Tarn was not. Tarn looked focused. He had lifted one heavy ceremonial boot in the air, and beneath it, glinting faintly on the cold floor, lay Lyra's silver wrist ring. If the boot came down, the ring would shatter. Lyra would be unable to walk for days. She would miss her performance. She would be carried out of the festival like a broken doll. Everyone would see it. Daniel did not think. He ran. He hit the floor on his knees, sliding the last short distance, and threw his right hand over the ring just as the boot came down. The crunch was small and wet. It sounded like a branch breaking inside a wet cloth. Pain exploded up his arm and into his shoulder and behind his eyes. The world tilted. He did not scream. He clenched his jaw so hard he tasted metal. Tarn froze, his boot still pressed down on Daniel's hand. The 2 friends behind him stopped laughing. The corridor was suddenly very quiet, except for Lyra, who had let out a small, broken sound. Daniel looked up slowly. His face was white. Sweat had broken out along his hairline. Blood was beginning to seep from beneath Tarn's boot. He spoke quietly. His voice did not shake. "You will not touch her." Tarn stared down at him. The Velkari boy was twice his weight. He could have pressed harder. He could have ground his boot into the broken bones. He had been about to. But something in the human boy's face stopped him. There was no fear there. There was no anger. There was only a calm that Tarn had never seen before, and somehow it terrified him. One of the friends behind Tarn grabbed his sleeve. Enough. Come on. Enough. Tarn slowly lifted his foot. He looked at the blood on the sole of his boot. He looked at Daniel. He looked at Lyra. His mouth opened as if he might say something. Then he closed it again. He turned and walked away. His friends followed quickly, glancing back over their shoulders as if afraid the human boy might rise and chase them. Daniel did not rise. He stayed kneeling on the floor, cradling his ruined hand against his chest. With his other hand, he carefully picked up Lyra's silver ring. It was perfect, untouched. He had taken the hit for it. He crawled the short distance to her. She was crying without sound. Tears slid silently down her pale cheeks. "Your hand," she whispered. "Your hand, your hand, your hand." "It still works," he lied. "Mostly." He slid the ring back onto her wrist with his left hand and tapped the small reset symbol the way she had once taught him. The ring lit up. The soft glow surrounded her body again. She rose a few centimeters off the floor, her limp legs lifting gently from the cold stone. "Daniel," she said. "We have a festival to attend," he said. "Your hand." "Later." He stood up. The corridor swam in front of him. He locked his knees and waited until the dizziness passed. Then he offered his good arm to her. She took it. They walked together, slowly, toward the festival hall. He held his broken hand inside his jacket so the blood would not show. A small black drone, no larger than an insect, hovered silently in a corner near the ceiling. It had recorded every second. It transmitted the footage to a private channel in less than half a minute. 1,000 light years away, in a quiet chamber lined with star maps, the High Matriarch of the Sovel Dominion watched the footage twice. Her face did not move. Her hands rested on the arms of her chair, as still as stone. Then, very slowly, she stood up. The advisors around her went silent. They had served her for many years. They had seen her receive declarations of war without rising from her seat. They had never seen her stand for any message before. She spoke quietly. "Bring me the boy's medical file. Bring me the Kovesh family's holdings list, and see to it that no one else lays a finger on my daughter tonight." The cloaked figures bowed and vanished. The screen went dark. In the festival hall, a small human boy with a broken hand sat in the front row and clapped for a girl performing a sacred dance. The medical bay smelled like cold mint and clean metal. A tall doctor with 4 long fingers on each hand moved around Daniel without saying much. She wrapped his broken hand in a soft black sleeve that hummed gently as it worked. The sleeve glowed faintly blue and pulled the swelling out of his skin like it was drawing water from a sponge. "You should have come sooner," she said. "There was a festival," Daniel said. The doctor looked at him as if he had just answered her in a language she had never heard. She finished the sleeve, gave him a small white pill for the pain, and waved him out. Lyra was waiting in the hall. She had insisted on coming with him. She floated quietly beside him as they walked the long, curved corridor toward her dorm. Neither of them spoke. The festival music had faded somewhere far behind them. The lights along the walls had dimmed to their night setting, a soft, pale gold. At her door she stopped. She did not press the panel to open it. She just stood there, floating in her gentle ring of light, looking at the floor. "Daniel," she said. "Yes. I have to tell you something." He waited. He had learned, in the short time he had known her, that pushing her did no good. She would speak when she had the words. She lifted her face. Her pale violet eyes were wet, but they were steady. "I am not who you think I am." "You are Lyra," he said. She shook her head slowly. "That is my name. That is not who I am." He waited again. She took a long breath. "My full name is Lyra Sovael. My mother is High Matriarch Valora Sovael. My family rules the Sovael Dominion." He blinked. She kept going, faster now, as if afraid she would lose courage. "The Dominion does not appear on the public maps. It is older than most of the empires you know. It owns the gate networks, the slipspace lanes. The food this academy serves comes from our farms. The gas giant we orbit belongs to us. The transport that brought you here moves through routes we built. My mother does not need armies because she does not need to fight anyone. She owns everything the fighting would be about. She stopped. Her hand trembled slightly. The ring chimed and steadied her. My mother has been watching you, she said, through the cameras, through her people. From the day you sat down at my table, she has watched everything. She closed her eyes. I am sorry I did not tell you. I was afraid. Everyone who learns who I am stops seeing me. They see a treasury. They see a path. They see what I can give them. I wanted just once to have one person who only saw me. She opened her eyes. I will understand if you are angry. I will understand if you walk away. I have lied to you for weeks. Daniel stood very still in the soft gold light of the hallway. His broken hand throbbed gently inside its sleeve. He looked at her, at the tears on her cheeks, at the wrist ring that kept her body upright. He spoke quietly. Is your ring charged? She blinked at him. What? Your ring. Is it charged? For tomorrow. You used the reset twice today. The battery sometimes drops after a double reset. She stared at him. The tears slid down faster. Daniel, she whispered. That is all I wanted to ask, he said. I do not care about the Dominion. I do not care about the gates. I do not care about the maps. I am sorry your mother had to watch me through cameras. That sounds tiring for her. She made a sound that was half laugh and half sob. You are just Lyra to me, he said. You always will be, even if your mother owns every star I can see. Tomorrow I will still meet you at the corner table, and you will still try to whistle, and you will still fail, and we will still laugh. That is the whole thing. She floated forward and pressed her forehead against his shoulder. It was the only kind of hug her body could give. He stood very still and let her. After a long moment, she lifted her head. Go to bed, she said. Your hand needs rest. Good night, Lyra. Good night, Daniel. He turned and walked down the corridor with his broken hand inside his pocket. He did not look back. He did not see her watch him until he turned the corner. In a chamber lit by the cold light of many stars, Valora Sovale watched the footage of the hallway scene 3 times in silence. Her advisors waited. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. He asked about the ring. Yes, my lady. He did not ask for a single thing. No, my lady. Not a credit. Not a title. Not a meeting. Not a favor. He asked if her battery was charged. She turned away from the screen. She walked slowly to the great window that looked out over the home stars of her line. She stood there for a long time. Prepare my vessel, she said at last. I will travel to Aurelis. I will meet this boy in person. The advisors bowed. One of them hesitated. My lady, the Kovesh holdings. You ordered them reviewed. She did not turn around. Begin the review tonight. Quietly. By the time I arrive, I want their accounts paused. Every contract, every lane, every coin. Do not break a single law. We do not need to. Yes, my lady. In a small trade office on a distant Velkari moon, a powerful merchant named Lord Kovesh received a polite communication that 3 of his largest contracts had been suspended pending review. He frowned. He did not yet know why. He poured himself a drink and made a few angry calls. He would understand within a day. Every dock controller in the sector lost the use of their hands at the same moment. Their consoles lit up red and then white, and then settled to a calm blue that none of them had ever seen before. A single override code had taken priority over every other signal in the system. They watched, frozen, as a vessel the color of polished obsidian slid out of slipspace beside the Academy. It bore no markings. It did not announce itself. It did not need to. The headmaster, a thin, nervous man with 3 rings around his neck, was eating breakfast when the alert reached him. He dropped his cup. The cup shattered on the floor. He did not notice. He was running. By the time he reached the main dock, the ramp of the obsidian vessel had already lowered. 2 rows of guards in dark silver armor stood at attention along it. Between them walked a tall woman in long, dark robes lined with silver thread. Her hair was the color of deep night. Her eyes were the same pale violet as Lyra's, but harder, older, used to giving orders that moved planets. The headmaster bowed so low he nearly fell. "High Matriarch, we did not expect you. We would have prepared." Valora Sovael did not look at him. She walked past him as if he were a coat rack. "I am here to see my daughter," she said, "and one of your students." "Of course, my lady, of course. Right this way." Lyra received her mother in a private receiving room near the upper gardens. When the door opened and her mother walked in, Lyra activated her ring fully and tried to rise out of her chair to greet her. Valora crossed the room in 3 long strides and held her gently in place. She bent down and pressed her forehead to Lyra's. They stayed like that for a long moment. "Mother," Lyra whispered. "My star," Valora said. She straightened. She looked at Lyra's wrist ring, at the way her daughter's body looked thinner than the last hologram had shown, at the small lines of tiredness around her eyes. Then she sat down across from her and took both her hands. "Tell me about him," she said. Lyra opened her mouth to defend Daniel, to explain, to ask her mother not to be angry. Valora shook her head gently. "I am not angry, my star. Tell me." So Lyra told her. About the spilled drink, about the bag he carried for her, about the laugh she had not used in years that he had pulled out of her one afternoon, about the corridor, about the boot, about the broken hand, about the question he had asked outside her dorm. Valora listened without interrupting. When Lyra finished, the High Matriarch sat very still for a long moment. Then she squeezed her daughter's hands once. "I would like to meet him now." Daniel was brought in by 2 soft-footed guards who treated him with a respect he did not understand. They led him down a corridor he had never seen before, through a door that opened on its own, into a room that smelled like a garden. He saw Lyra first. He gave her a small nod. Then he saw the tall woman seated across from her, and he understood without being told. He bowed the way his father had taught him to bow when meeting elders, not low, not flashy, just sincere, with his good hand pressed flat against his chest. "Ma'am," he said. Valora studied him. Her face did not move. Her eyes did not soften. "Sit down, Daniel." He sat. He kept his broken hand inside his jacket out of habit. She noticed and gestured at it. "Show me." He hesitated, then pulled it out. The soft black sleeve hummed quietly around the swollen fingers. She looked at it for a long time. She did not speak. Finally, she lifted her eyes to his face. "I have one question." "Yes, ma'am." "Why did you protect her, knowing nothing of who she was?" Daniel did not have to think. The answer came out the way breath comes out. Because she was alone and someone wanted to hurt her. That was enough. The room was very quiet. Lyra was watching her mother with a tense, hopeful expression. Valora leaned back slightly in her chair. She turned her gaze to the window, where the gas giant filled the view with its slow orange storms. When she spoke again, her voice was softer than it had been all morning. "Do you know what my family is, Daniel?" "Lyra told me." "Then you know that with a single word I could give you a fleet, a title, a planet, a bloodline of your own, servants, stars. I could rewrite your name into the registries of 100 houses by tomorrow morning." She turned back to him. "Look at me when I say this. I am offering, truly. Tell me what you want." Daniel was quiet. Lyra held her breath. "I do not want any of that, ma'am." Valora did not blink. "Are you certain?" "Yes. Most beings would take it." "I am not most beings. I am Daniel. My father raised one boy. He did not raise a fleet." A long silence. "Then what do you want?" Daniel thought for a moment. He looked at Lyra. He looked back at Valora. "I want Lyra to be safe here. I want the bullies to leave her alone. I want her to be able to sit in the dining hall and laugh without anyone touching her ring. That is everything I want." Valora's hands rested very still in her lap. Lyra had begun to cry silently again. "That is a small wish," Valora said. "It is the right size for me, ma'am." The High Matriarch was quiet for a long time. Then she nodded once. Your wish will be honored exactly, she said. Nothing more, nothing less. She paused. Her eyes grew colder, just for a moment. But some matters are no longer yours to manage. The Kovesh family has already made their bed. A small accountant on a distant Velkari moon had been working through the night. His desk was buried under flickering blue ledgers. He had not slept. He had not eaten. He kept refreshing the same screen, hoping the numbers would change, hoping he had misread something. He had not. By the time the moon's pale sun rose over the trade district, the Kovesh family was finished. Every contract paused. Every trade lane closed. Every loan called in. Every partner suddenly busy with other matters. None of it broke a single law. All of it was precise. The Sovale Dominion did not punish with armies. It punished with arithmetic. Lord Kovesh sat in his collapsing estate and watched the markers being removed from his front gate by the people who had once worked for him. He understood now. He had pieced it together in the small hours of the morning. His son had touched a human boy in a corridor on a floating academy. His son had not known whose corner that boy had quietly chosen to stand in. By midday, Tarn Kovesh was on a transport home. His robes had been stripped of their family insignia. He sat alone in the back of the pod and stared at the floor. He did not yet know how deep the fall had been. He would learn within a week. His name was already being quietly removed from the academy's roll. The other bullies who had ever laughed at Lyra found themselves politely reassigned over the following days. A transfer here, a family illness there, a scholarship pulled by an apologetic letter. None of them were harmed. None of them were touched. None of them ever forgot. The academy itself began to change. The corridors gained smooth ramps where there had once been small steps. New devices appeared in the medical bay for students with conditions like Lyra's. A wing was opened for accessibility research. A generous grant arrived from an anonymous benefactor. It came with one polite condition, printed neatly at the bottom of the letter. The human student Daniel Hart was to be treated with the same respect as any heir of any noble house in the galaxy. The headmaster framed the letter and hung it in his office. Daniel noticed almost none of it. He noticed that the corridors felt friendlier. He noticed that Lyra's ring worked better than it used to, with a brighter glow and a smoother chime. He noticed that his black medical sleeve had been replaced overnight with one so advanced it tingled when he flexed his fingers, and the doctor would not tell him where it had come from. He shrugged and went to lunch. Lyra was waiting at the corner table. She was already laughing before he sat down. "What?" he said. "My mother," she said. "What about her?" "She liked you." "How can you tell?" "She told me. She said, and I quote, that you are an extraordinarily inconvenient young man." Daniel paused with his spoon halfway to his mouth. "That sounds bad." "It is the highest compliment my mother has ever paid anyone in her life. It means you cannot be bought. She finds it deeply annoying. She is also a little fond of you." He thought about that. "I will take it." She laughed. The sound carried across the dining hall. A few other students looked over. None of them sneered now. A small group of new students, a tall blue boy with feathered ears and a short stone-skinned girl, were sitting nearby. The blue boy raised a hand in a polite wave. Lyra waved back. Daniel watched her wave with her good hand, her trembling one resting in her lap. Her ring chimed gently and held her steady. "Try the whistle again," he said. "No. Try." "I will not." "You said you would." "I did not." "You did." She glared at him. Then she puckered her mouth in the strange shape her species could not quite manage, and blew air. A small squeak came out. It sounded like a tiny door hinge. She immediately began to laugh so hard she had to grip the table. He laughed too, not loudly, just the soft, real laugh of a boy who had not laughed much in his life and was beginning to learn how. Years later, when historians of a dozen species wrote long, careful essays about the quiet golden age that had come to the Aurelis Cultural Academy, they would write about diplomatic shifts. They would write about new accessibility laws that had swept through the inner systems. They would write about the strange financial collapse of one minor noble house that had triggered reforms across the trade lanes. None of them would mention a quiet human boy with a bandaged hand who had once knelt to wipe a spilled drink. None of them would know that the cosmos itself had quietly decided to protect him in return, because he had protected a girl when no one else would. He never told anyone. Lyra never told anyone. Valora never told anyone. The silent hand never told anyone. It remained a small story, held by 4 people, lived inside a corner table in a dining hall that smelled faintly of warm honey bread. Many years later, when Daniel was a man with gray at his temples, he would still write to her every week. He would still receive a reply every week. They had never married. They had never needed to. Some bonds did not require contracts. And many years later still, when a different high matriarch sat in a chamber lined with star maps, watching her own daughter laugh with a quiet human friend at a different dining table, she would smile faintly and think of a story her mother had once told her. A story about a boy who had not known whose hand he was holding. A story about a girl who had wanted, just once, to be seen. A story about a mother who had stood up from her throne for the first time in 200 years because a human child had asked only one thing: was the ring charged? It was. It always would be.